Life is precious. I think we would all agree. But often we find that we take the very things that we do every day in life for granted until something happens in a blink of an eye. Hello, I'm Tom Russo, and this is In a Blink of an Eye, where we discuss stories from ordinary people whose lives are changed in an instant and how they have overcome through faith, courage, and determination. Join me on this podcast for uplifting stories of how people face various challenges and learn to not only survive, but thrive. Now, In a Blink of an Eye is sponsored by TradingCardsMarketplace.com. Discover, connect, collect. That's TradingCardsMarketplace.com. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have a special treat for us today. One of the loveliest young ladies that I have ever had the good fortune of briefly getting to work with for 1 year in the teaching world. She moved off to New York, but I'm glad to welcome Catherine Woodin. Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tom. I'm so excited that you wanted to talk to me. As a teacher, I
Oh,
feel like we don't get that many shout outs, so it's exciting.
well, I have to let the audience know something special about you before we even get started on this. After my first episode, and like I said, I worked with Catherine at my first school I worked for, my first year in teaching. We worked together, and we had a good time working together. She was a wonderful teacher. The students loved her, and I was sad because she and her husband made a decision to move away. That we'll talk about that later. But she moved far away, moved to New York, so it's like another country almost, and far away from Texas, that's for sure. And I, while I was Facebook friends with her, I didn't get to visit with her very often. But after my first episode, this super nice lady wrote me the kindest note on Facebook Messenger. And it was kind of the impetus, ladies and gentlemen, that kept me going within a blink of an eye. This is the lady right here that did that. Her message said that it touched her and made her rethink her teaching abilities and everything. And it just meant so much to me. And I wanted you to know that, Catherine, that you were a spark that kept me going with this, and that meant an awful lot to me.
Well, thank you so much. Like I said, like it's sometimes just so hard just to get out of bed in the morning and make myself, do the same thing teaching every day, and just to hear that I inspired anyone is just it just makes me feel like it's all worth it. So I really appreciate you saying that.
Well, absolutely. Well, the way we usually start these shows out, Catherine, is I let my guests tell a little bit about their story, where you grew up, where you went to school, how you met your family. Uh, Gonna toss it to you right now and let you talk for a minute.
Yeah, so I was born in Galveston, Texas. If you know Texas and you know Galveston, you know how incredibly special Galveston is. Um, it's special that I was born in Galveston because my great great grandparents actually met because of the 1900 storm. They
Oh,
met during the
wow.
storm. One of my great great grandmother, there was a rocking chair that was floating by, and she was grabbing onto it, and the police said, "We don't know if that's yours." She said, "No, this is my rocking chair." And this man came and pretended to be her husband. And he said, "No, that is my wife's rocking chair. Let her have it." And the police said, "Okay, you're the husband. We believe you." And that they ended up getting married because of that meeting.
Oh,
And
wow, what an interesting
so
story.
to be born in Galveston on November 8th,
So you're
1990,
what
later
you're
on.
what they call a BOI, right?
Yeah,
Born on
yeah,
the island?
BOI, and just, the fact that that's where they met, and then being born there on, November 8th, 1990 later on just kind of brought it full circle, and Galveston's always been very special to me. I, even have I don't know if you could see it, but my birthmark does look like a seahorse.
Oh, wow.
So I've just always been a beach girl, love Galveston. Um, Also, if you're familiar with, Texas and that area at all, I grew up near Texas City where a lot of the refineries are. It's interesting because my great grandparents, met during the 1900 storm, and they kind of stayed a little bit off the mainland. And my grandfather worked, it was before it was BP and all that, it was Amoco back in the day. And then they had Amoco Bank. And so my grandfather worked at Amoco and the refineries, and we just kind of stayed in the mainland area. My grandparents were very strong Episcopalian. Anybody that goes to Episcopal church in Texas will know John and Betty Jacobson. They're now deceased, but they brought my mom up in a very strong Episcopalian household, and she raised my two younger brothers and I in a very, very strong Episcopalian household where we were actually homeschooled until halfway through eighth grade. I was homeschooled because my mom wanted to raise me reading the Bible and just teaching me everything about my faith. And I think it's so interesting today because she taught us especially in like Black History Month, she taught us so much about slavery and racism and things from like a very, very early age that I wouldn't have necessarily gotten all that exposure to in public school, just all the stories about the Underground Railroad. And I think it also kind of ties back that I'm teaching in a primarily Black charter school today, and the fact that I'm able to use some of that. In homeschool, you get to give that extra knowledge and context to have your kids read whatever books you want. So now I kind of get to give some of that knowledge that I know to my kids who would know absolutely nothing about those things until now.
Well, and it sounds like it also set up an incredible faith background for you as well.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
a lot of people don't necessarily get. A lot of people don't get that opportunity ever or until much later in life. So kudos that you were exposed to that at a young age as well.
Yeah,
Very well-rounded young lady, it
thank you.
sounds like.
Thank you. I have to give that to my mom, and from her parents, just teaching about having compassion for people, having, we're all equal, God loves everyone. And my dad, is interesting because I was homeschooled by my mom, but my dad was also an educator in Dickinson High School. If you're familiar with Dickinson, he was a teacher
I
there
went to
for.
Clear Creek. I went to Clear
Oh,
Creek High School.
nice, nice. My dad taught his high school history in Dickinson forever, so that was really cool. Just having my dad there. I eventually went to Dickinson High School and was taught by my dad also. So I've actually been taught by both of my parents. Um, but my dad, he was just a big part of my life. So I just had a great childhood. I went to church every week. I danced ballet. I was in sports. And then because my family didn't have a whole lot of money, because stay-at-home mom, teacher dad, it kind of forced us to go to not the nicest parts of places. When we would go traveling, when we go to Mexico, for example, we weren't going to Cancun and Cozumel. We were going to like in the mountains in Mexico, like the real Mexico. And that was really cool because I got to see people living in, shacks, and some out in the country, some of the houses were made by mud, and some kids younger than me would be, asking for money, and I had never seen that in my life. And I always knew people had more money than me because my dad was a teacher, and some of my family had a little bit bigger houses. But when I went to Mexico, it really put into perspective, like, wow, I feel rich compared to this.
You got to see another side of the world. You
I
really
really got
did.
to see another side of the world, and so, it's interesting because this brings me to my first, blink of an eye moment. I don't know, exactly what time it was, but I remember I was around 8 years old, and all of a sudden, the middle of the night, I was looking out the window, and I was thinking about some of the poor, the poorest of the poor kids I had seen in Mexico. For example, one time, we were at a hotel, and to flush the toilet, you had to give a kid a peso to take a bucket of water and do it for you. And then
Oh,
so every
wow.
time you use the restroom, you would pay this child who was younger than me with these buckets, taking out your junk, dumping it out, and replenishing the water. And as a very young kid seeing this, thinking, my dad's a teacher, he doesn't have a lot of money, and then seeing that I'm so blessed and don't have to do those things. And I had my first blink of an eye moment one night. God told me, I want you to go back and help basically some of the kids in Mexico I had seen. I want you to go back and help the kids that are less fortunate than you. And I never actually went back to Mexico and was a missionary or anything, but I love that I eventually ended up in a Title I school with primarily Hispanic students, and a lot of them coming from Mexico. And a lot of them did not, some of them had money, but it was like 80%
Oh,
economically
I think that,
disadvantaged.
80 to 90%, that
Yeah,
first school
probably
you
more
had that were
closer to
below the
90.
poverty line, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I mean, I feel like I did live that up. But I remember God telling me from a very early age, like, and my grandmother would also tell me, you're blessed, you have parents that love you. Some kids don't have that. And just getting that mindset as a child was very, very powerful. So, I went to school at University of Houston because my whole life I was always loved taking pictures. But
Go
as soon as I
Cougs.
met my husband at the end of college, I really wanted to like settle down and marry him immediately. Like I just knew he was the one, and so kind of switched
Well,
from
let's
art.
explore that for a second because
Yeah,
you mentioned to me off
I fast
camera,
forward that part.
you said that that was certainly a blink of an eye moment for you,
Oh
that it
yeah,
happened so fast that it almost defies logic almost, that you kinda saw him and it was like that, "Ah," moment, you know? Tell me about that a
you would
little
love
bit.
that you said that. Yeah, so it was funny because I actually met Ken through a guy I was dating at the time, and he was walking me around church. We were actually at church, at this one church, and he said, "Catherine, I have to introduce you to my friend Ken." And you know how God works; it's just sometimes it's through connections. And I was ready to go. I was like, "No, like let's go, let's go." He's like, "No, Catherine, like before we leave, like I gotta, like you're gonna love my friend
Gotta
Ken."
see this guy.
Yeah, he's you gotta see this guy. I was like, fine, who is this guy? He must be pretty great because like I'm ready to go. And I saw Ken and this group of people talking and laughing. You could just tell he was like the center of attention. Like all these people were kind of huddled around him. And at that time, it was like the youth group because we were like in college, so it was some of the college kids at the church hanging out. And I met Ken, and later on, I broke up with another guy and started dating him, and that's how we met.
His loss.
Yeah, and it's funny because like, I saw us on Facebook later, and he saw a picture of us together, and he just commented, "Interesting."
That's
So,
beautiful, though.
but
That's
yeah, I
beautiful,
always I mean,
and
my grandma taught me from a young kid. She said, "Pray for your husband right now, because he's a little boy about your age," and then I'd be a teenager. She said, "Pray for your husband right now, because he's probably going to prom, he's probably applying for colleges," and so I prayed for him my whole life. So, I dated a few people before him, but when I met him, I feel like because I had prayed for him my whole life, I just knew. He didn't know, but I knew.
but it was almost like God told you, "Hey, this is the right guy for
Exactly.
you.
Exactly.
This is gonna be your future."
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, from the time I was 8, I guess God's just delivered a few blink of an eye moments because when I was 8, that's when he told me, "You're gonna be I want you to work with kids that are poor." And when I met Ken, he just I knew that when I had a feeling that was the one, and my feelings had been right before.
Well, you started out, correct me if I'm wrong, but you started out kinda wanting to be a photographer, right?
Right, right, I did.
And, so how did that change and morph into teaching?
It was just the fact that I needed money for rent. I didn't have money for rent. I was living with people on Craigslist towards the end of my teaching career, and it was very kind of sad, and I'm still kind of sad about it because I really wanted to be a documentary photographer. I want at the end of my college career, we had to do like a senior project, and my project was "Can I Come Inside?" where I actually went to strangers' houses with my brother. I didn't go alone, but I would go to
Right.
rich parts of Houston, poor parts of Houston, parts in between, just all in the Houston area, and I would knock on random doors and say, "Can I come in and take a picture with you inside of your house?" And
Oh,
so, I mean, this
wow.
is n now
That
that
was
I'm thinking
bold.
about it, I didn't look at crime maps, I didn't look at it was just, here's a neighborhood, here's a nice neighborhood,
That
here's
was
a not so one.
strong. That was strong.
But again, I wasn't alone, so my brother or some, guy, a bigger guy than me was always there, and, I knocked on the door and said, "Can I come inside?" And I went to some of the Victorian homes in Galveston and have some pictures with the stories, I heard from people were so amazing, and, I remember one of my photography professors kinda pulled me out away from the class and was talking to me in her office. She said, "Catherine, your project is one of probably the strongest out of any one of your class." She was like, "Don't tell anyone I said that." And I joked with my
Wow.
husband. I was like, "She could have said that to everyone." But she said,
I
you
doubt that.
really are bold and you have something here. And I think you could really be a great photographer, but you need to work on your technical skills." Back then it was, I was still, having some trouble with the digital aspect of digital photography. Like I love the darkroom stuff, but I was, it's a lot learning how to print correctly and all of that. And I struggled a little bit, but she was telling me, you could really be great. It's just you need to work on your technical skills. She was being honest, and so that really was my dream. But when I met Ken, it had been my dream longer to have a family and get married than it had ever been to be a photographer. And so I still did weddings and things like that, but I immediately was like, I need to settle down and get money and have a salary. So, but that blossomed into, what I felt like was
Into
God's
teaching.
purpose.
Yeah, well, I mean, God does speak to us like that, and I know I shared with you how I got into teaching. That wasn't what I started out being at all, and so that certainly is something that I can identify with. It's funny because you went into teaching to kind of get a paycheck. Uh, I lowered my paycheck by 2/3, I think, to become a teacher. So,
That's
uh,
because you didn't start out as an artist.
we kind of went in opposite
That's
directions
true.
there,
I
but I
never thought about
certainly
that.
understand what you mean. So here we are. You've met your love of your life. You've changed passions or professions, if you will, and become a teacher. And specifically, you went into art, right?
Mhm.
You
Right.
taught art or you teach art. How did that come about?
Well, I taught art because I had an art degree, so I definitely knew, painting techniques and drawing techniques, and I still had to take like I guess the general teacher test that you have to take for math and ELA and everything, and I passed all those, but I was specifically got my license to be an art teacher. And so, I mean, it was fun because I still, even though I wasn't doing photography like for my career, it was cool to teach kids how to do digital photography and how to, some kids had never mixed they
Experienced
didn't
any
know
of that?
what colors made blue or green, whatever, like, they had never done that stuff before, so it was so cool to see them, there was a fire that would come in their eyes sometimes they'd never mixed paint together, and it was a beautiful thing.
That is that is truly remarkable how it moved you to do something like that. And I know as you were a teacher, one of the first times where our paths crossed was at Lewis Middle School in Aldine in Houston,
Right,
and you were doing a fundraiser.
right.
And I remember you coming and talking to me a little bit about it and me getting excited about it for you and helping you, but I was amazed at the effort and the work that you did. Tell us a little bit about that fundraiser because I know that was almost a blink of an eye moment for you as well.
So, I feel like it's sad that I had a son in, 2019, and I haven't even added that as a blink of an eye moment, but I guess that wasn't so
Well, that
much of a
certainly is too. I understand that. Yes.
So anyway, rewind a little bit because I have to mention it. My son, beautiful boy Alistair Woodin, was born in 2019, and so here comes 2020, and Alistair's not in school yet. He had just turned 1, and it was the pandemic, and everyone was super frustrated about the teachers had to learn all these new, teaching virtually and online, and I'm over here like, yes, I get to stay home. You know, and I definitely felt bad for the kids who didn't have, necessarily have iPads or even laptops or desktop
Right.
computers. And, we would watch the news, and a lot of us in Texas, were watching New York City and seeing how, the trucks roll in. I still have that in my brain of all the bodies. And it was it looked like a war zone on TV. And I'm sitting at home, I can't even see my mom, much less go to work. And I was just like, what can I do? Like, what can I do? And in the blink of an eye, there was a moment I had where I was thinking, you know what I could do? I could raise money for kids that don't have laptops at home. And I had kind of asked our principal, I said, I know our school is ordering laptops from Chromebooks specifically from China. When is that going to get here? And she said, it was like 3, 4 months because all the schools were ordering, new Chromebooks from China at the same time. And so I said, you know what I could do? Because parents were calling me, texting me, I don't have any device for my kid to get online to do school. Like, what do I do? And the school only had so many laptops to give
Give
out. So
out.
everyone
Right.
was scrambling, but I was like, I can try to get whoever's on my roster who needs laptops, I can try to fundraise for them. And I kind of I'd never done an online fundraiser before, so that was when I first found out about like GoFundMe, and I had started that immediately. I was like, oh, I could just make a GoFundMe because that takes 2 seconds to set it up. But then I realized as an educator, you can't do that. You have to use Donors Choose. You have to see what your district, allows you to do. So that was kind of a little road bump because I wasn't aware that I couldn't even do that. So I learned it was kind of interesting because it got me talking to the Aldine finance director, who I would have never talked to her in my life, but she taught me about how to go about the process of starting a Donors Choose and kind of following the rules of like what was acceptable of raising money for a school district. And so I learned a lot there, and I had some family that donated, but I really needed about $10,000 for to get 102 Chromebooks. That's how many I needed for the kids that, I kind of did a survey and say who needs
Right.
Chromebooks. And so I needed about 10,000 for that, and I don't remember how it started, but I ended up writing, I was like, you know what? I wonder, everyone's at home right now. Celebrities are at home. That's when TikTok was blowing up and you saw celebrities posting videos of themselves dancing. Everyone was bored on their phones. And I thought, if everyone's bored on their phones at home, there's a lot of people with a lot of money that are bored on their phones at home. And I thought about celebrities, I thought about sports players, and then I thought about, who would really want to give money to kids from Houston. I looked at people that had been on the Texans previously, who had been on the Astros previously, people had any kind of ties to Houston. I found out the, data from Star Trek, Brent Snyder. Found out that he originally was from Houston, or I don't remember if he grew up here or something. And so I wrote him. I
Had
said,
some highs, yeah.
yeah, I said, "Hey, Brent, like, my name's Catherine. I'm from Houston. I found out that you're from Houston too." And I said, and I would never ask for money. I just said, "Would you share this?" Because that was the most important thing, is that it would be shared. And I didn't have many Instagram followers, but he had millions of followers. And I said, "Would you mind sharing this on your Twitter page?" And he actually messaged me back, which still today I'm like fangirling over because that was so cool that someone actually, that they were on their phones. Everyone was at home on their phones. No one was really working. And he messaged me back and he shared it on his page. He reposted it to his millions of followers. And it was cool to see, as one person, sometimes we don't always think that we have a lot of power, or we don't know a lot of people to really make a change, but you could be a nobody and just have the guts
Well,
to.
and to your point, Catherine, one of the things that I love about what you did there is too often people are afraid
Right.
to reach out to those that maybe have more followers or who are famous or
Right.
whatever you want to call, but they're just people like you and I. And most of
Exactly.
the time, not all the time, we all are different. We're all built differently, but a lot of times they can sense your genuineness. And
Right.
I think the people that answered you and responded to you certainly did. And I know it came to crunch time where you only had like 1 or 2 nights left
Right.
and you still hadn't reached your goal
Right.
and you were a little upset about it. Tell me
Yeah.
about what happened then.
So I think I want to say it was 2 nights, but it may have literally been the night before. The $10,000 was like my goal. It was on a certain date, and if for donors choose, if you don't meet your goal by this date, then all the money gets sent back to the people. So it's not like they lose money. The donors don't lose, but you didn't meet your goal, so it's just you have to start all over again. And I had $2,000 left, and at this point, I had asked some family. I had really I was like, I can't post it on Facebook anymore. Like, there's just so much I can ask, and I
Can't
had
do.
$2,000 left, and I was just like, "You know what? I'm gonna go hard one more night. I know that I like I was like, it's $2,000. Like someone can do it." And I had gotten some good feedback from some MLB players, so I just started going down the list of people who had previously been on the Astros or just had anything to do with Houston. And I'll never forget the name Scott Kazmir, because the next morning I looked, it said Scott Kazmir donated 2,000. The remainder is like $2,000. And
That is so awesome.
yeah, it was amazing, and his name is like, I really should write him again someday, because his name is still burned in my head that was it. And my husband and I were jumping up and down the living room like, "Yes, thanks, Scott," and the fact that I'm just a kid from Lamarck, Texas. Nobody knows where that is, but I was able to reach out to some MLB players and some people who had a lot more money and a lot more just ability than I did to make this happen for some kids in need. And so it
But
was
you
really
touched their
cool.
heart. You touched their heart and they responded and it allowed you to do something special for all those children. And
Right, right.
and I think uh, that's one of the things that I really admired about you from afar as a teacher that taught with you on the faculty there at Lewis was that you didn't let anything stop you. You reached out. You helped those students. I remember talking to some of your students that I had also in my class. They loved you. They just
Oh,
absolutely loved you, and
and I loved you too, which is funny because I would hear them talking
everybody
about you.
everybody was so crushed when you made
Oh,
the decision to move to New York. Now I know that was another mini blink moment because you were this simple Houston
yeah,
area girl,
yeah.
probably had not spent a lot of time in New York, if
No,
ever,
never been.
and now all of a sudden you're living near Central Park.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, my whole life, it's very interesting how you never know what's really influencing you and shaping your mind, subliminally, but it is. I mean, when I was in the 8th grade, I was a huge Spider-Man fan. I mean, huge, and that's when Spider-Man 2 came out. And I remember it because it was the first time my mom ever let me see a PG-13 movie. Because, I was homeschooled, so she didn't play. So it was my first PG-13 movie I ever went to, and it was Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire, that version.
Right, right.
And I just fell in love with that movie so much because, it was about a hero overcome, a nobody who um was overcoming, and he was kind of trying to choose who he was going to be. Was he going to go with his superhero powers that kind of alienated him from his family, or was he going to be, just be a normal guy? And I just love that conflict. And I fell in love with Spider-Man through like my whole high school. And I even got my engagement ring. I don't know if you could see it, but it has spiders on it. Do you see that? And
I do
so
see that.
it
That's
started with
fantastic.
it started with my love for Spider-Man, but then, it's set in New York City, so I even from, like, before Spider-Man, I always thought New York City was cool because every movie as a kid, takes place in New
The
York
center
City.
of the universe, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's the center of the universe. It was where, that's where you go to, that's where your dreams are made of, and so that does stick in your head, and it was interesting because I never knew my husband till I had met him, but he said same thing when he was a kid, video games, his skateboarding video games, movies, anything. It was all in New York City. So both of us as children never meeting each other, and so many others, you've always just Hollywood gives you this idea that New York, you can kind of be who you want to be. But now that I moved here, I mean, you really can't because it's just a pretty incredible place. Um,
Well, you
so
you moved away, and, you and your husband have been married about 10 years, I
yeah,
believe. Is that correct?
and
And you
in
moved
April,
away and started this new life in New York, and you continued your teaching career, and I mentioned that note you dropped me when I went through, my ordeal, and you sent me just the nicest, kindest note, and you had mentioned that it kind of reinvigorated you in your teaching career because you were kind of at a low point in your teaching career. Tell me a
right.
little bit about that.
So I've kind of come to the mentality of, there's you never know who wants to be at a different job or who's not happy. Your principal could not want to be there. You never really know, but it's really on God's time. It's not my time. Teaching is a very, as you know, even for 2 years, it's an extremely emotionally draining and heavy thing that I don't think I know no one else understands unless you've been in it because I mean, you're dealing sometimes with CPS. Up here it's called ACS, kids coming to you and you having to report things and sometimes police getting involved. Like there's so many things your spouses won't understand when you say you've had a long day at work. It just goes so much, deeper than teaching kids how to read and math, which is extremely hard. If you're the only one
Absolutely.
doing it. Some kids go home and their parents are amazing with homework. Sometimes you are it. You're the only exposure they're gonna get. And I'm a first grade teacher
Well, and
now.
it is draining. It is draining, and so
Yeah,
I certainly understand where you were feeling, and I'm glad that maybe my message helped you as well.
yeah.
So I think we kinda did a symbiotic relationship there and
No,
kinda
yeah,
helped
really.
each other out, kinda
Yeah,
helped you refocus on your career,
yeah, and
and,
I was gonna say, like, at the beginning, it was, it was hard for the first 2 years. I'm coming up on the 4th year, and I still, I still have I think an end goal of being a fundraiser one day. Ever since 2020, I've really seen like I really want to raise money for kids who need it. And even at my own school, I've gone to my principal and asked, I will raise money for you to get a playground. Like please, like basically,
right,
create a
something,
job for me. But that's not really how that works. But
right.
I still have it in my heart to do something like that. But right now I'm like, this is where God has me. It's not on my time. This is on his time. He wants me to be a teacher right now, and so I go in every day and I put it my best foot forward because, some people would, and I tell myself all the time, some people, want a teaching job and pray for a teaching job and aren't, are getting turned down and not getting it. It's not easy for everyone. And, my mom would always tell me too, like, no matter what, I forgot who said this. But she said, there was someone that said, even if you're a custodian, whatever you're doing, you do it your best. You do it to your
You do
best
it the
because you
absolute
never
best that you
know
can be.
who wishes that they had that job that you have, so you have to be grateful and all you have is now. So I've been trying
Right.
since then I've been trying to have a better attitude about it. And when I watched that episode of your, I was crying listening to you talk about your eye and think of you could wake up every day being bitter about a job, but like I can see, I have my vision and then I just really think that, you hear stories from people and it kind of makes you think, "No, wait, like, I need to step back and enjoy what I have because
Yeah, it makes
could
you
be taken."
reevaluate things and
It does.
understand that God blesses us all in different ways. Uh, anyway, that's a certainly leads me to probably your biggest blink of an eye moment. And this is a tough one because in 2024, your husband got diagnosed with, I want to make sure I get it right, classic Hodgkin's lymphoma. Is that
Right,
correct?
right.
And, tell us a little bit about that, and tell us, you said you actually had a blink of an eye
Yeah.
moment when you first heard that.
Yeah, so it's not a story that I've told a lot of people, but I actually during that time I was like I have got to get out of the classroom. Like I have to get another job. I don't care what it is. Like I just need to make the same and it needs to be something else. Like it just got to a point where I was like this is not good for my mental health. Like I've done it, long enough. I need to go. And so I actually had an interview for like it was at a school, but an operations job. So kind of being the leader of the office, talking to families and all that. And it's funny now because I'm seeing like that was a hard interview to those don't come often, but it was actually a recruiter from LinkedIn wrote me and I had an interview and so I was sitting, in the Zoom, you're like anxiously waiting for them to log on. I was all dressed up, ready for my interview, and I was excited because I was like, okay, this is it. Like I might nail this and I could get out of the classroom, right? And Ken texts me, my husband Ken texts me and he says, he was at the hospital, not the hospital, the doctor having a checkup, but I didn't really think of anything. He was just there, and I was at home with my son doing this interview, and while I'm waiting for the interview to come on, he texts me, "Cancel interview. I have cancer." And that was the text.
Oh gosh.
I was like, "Now you wanna text me this?" I was so I it's
Oh,
so funny because I didn't even have the time to let it even sink in or process. I was just thinking like, "I've been waiting for this interview, like, now you're gonna text me that you have cancer, like" and so I, typed the guy, "Sorry, like, something came up, family emergency, like, I can't do the interview." And I mean, I
wow.
just sat there and just stared at my phone. I was like, you're like, "Is it what kind of cancer?" All these questions, and, it was about a whole year, the all of 2024, it was a lot. Finding out that he had cancer of the lungs, they said they had found a mass, and that was his checkup to see if it was actually cancerous, and it was. And that was just like, nobody can be prepared for that one, like
Nobody's ready for that, and since then, that's a hard road to go down,
exactly.
and tell me about how that's changed your life, how that's changed his life, how that's
Right.
changed your son's life. I know it's affected you all in many different ways.
Yeah, well, it was, interesting because my work did have, an FMLA where I could still get paid, not of my full paycheck, but a percentage of it for 12 weeks, so, thank God, I had it made me feel more grateful actually for my job because my insurance paid for all of the cancer treatments, and I mean, it
Right.
was I think he said over $1 million worth of treatments
Oh,
that
wow.
like, it was just God saying, "This is another reason that, like, you should be grateful. Not everyone has insurance," and the
Right,
fact that
right.
my job that I wanted to leave really saved his life, you know what I mean? I have known
That's
people who didn't have insurance and died from cancer. My friend's mom, and, so it was that
that's a
aspect.
God thing there too, though.
Yeah, and then immediate it's interesting anytime there's like a jolt or like a roadblock in my life and everything kinda and I stop working, I immediately go to raising money online. That's what happened in the pandemic, and that's what happened with this. I was like, "Okay, you're home, start making money again." Like, that's just I don't know why it's the first thing that kinda clicks in my mind, but, even with the insurance, there were still fees that people didn't think about, like Ubers, because we live in Brooklyn and he was going to Mount Sinai in Manhattan, and, who wants to come home from a chemo appointment on the subway? Like, it's just there was some times that he was, you know, could barely stand after a chemo appointment, and
Right.
he
Well,
wanted to
sure.
take an Uber, and so, I had actually done a GoFundMe and raised about, $8,000 just for little fees like that, Ubers, food delivery, helping us, he's the one who cooks at home, and he coulda cooked, just things like that, and it's just interesting. Anytime that I stop working and I'm at home, it's the first thing to, like, help either help myself or help someone else financially, like, what can I do to just get on it, And,
Well, you have an
so
exceptionally generous soul, and I
oh,
and
okay.
I love that about you, and I know that it's tough on your husband and your son and you going through this.
Right.
But I know that God has your back too, and I
Oh,
know
yeah.
it's in His hands, and I know that with your faith and your strong faith background, that you're battling this and fighting it the best way that you possibly can, and
Right.
know that whatever the plan is, it's in God's hands, but you're doing what you can do to
Yeah.
make it better.
Yeah, and I
Um,
love that, like, doing what you could do, because that's all you could do is what are my goals that day? What are my goals for the next hour? That's am I focused on that, you know? It's one step at a time.
right. Absolutely. And I think that we have to, as a faith-filled people, we have to know that, God's going to set the table for us. It's going to happen what's going to happen, but we have to make choices to put things in motion. And
Exactly.
I think that's a very big part of what we do.
Right.
And I got to tell you, Catherine, I can't thank you enough for today. It's hard to believe we've already
I know.
talked for over 35 minutes.
I just looked
Isn't it
up the clock
amazing how
too.
fast
Yeah,
it goes?
it does.
Every guest I have tells me, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's already up." But I want to be true to our time that we said. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but I hope that you hang on the line here for a
Yeah,
moment after I conclude everything, and then we'll end it up.
right.
But if you like hearing uplifting stories of overcoming challenges in life, click the like and subscribe button below. That's my livelihood. That helps me spread the word and spread all these great messages of all wonderful people like Catherine here. I like doing that, and it helps when you like and subscribe it. Perhaps you have a story of your own to share: an accident, sudden loss, PTSD, alcohol, drug abuse, a natural disaster, illnesses, and you would like to share that journey of overcoming. Please contact me at the email shown below for consideration for a future podcast interview. I rely on viewers like you to share their stories. Thanks again to TradingCardsMarketplace.com for their continued sponsorship to bring these great stories to all of us. TradingCardsMarketplace.com. Discover, connect, collect. Awaken the collector in you. And lastly, I want to thank everyone out there, especially my family, our military, veterans, and first responders who put their lives on the line every single day. And please don't forget our teachers, like Catherine and myself, and medical professionals like my wife, who all make the world better one person at a time. Most of all, though, thank the big man upstairs. Thank God for all the blessings in our world. We just need to make sure that we concentrate on them every single day. Until next time, my friends, carpe diem, seize the day.